Jade, welcome back.
Hi, Dima. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for suggesting that we do this because I've never been so intrigued. I just feel, and I'll just say before we start, like, I don't know any of these people personally. Do you? You don't?
No,
Okay.
we run in similar circles. We're like 1 degree of separation. So initially I
Yeah.
was even cautious of this, but yeah.
But so it's not like, for me, this is not a personal, I don't care what these people do with their lives. It's
Mm.
just that, this example and this story brings together so many things that I've been interested in, and I know you've been interested in, and I think a lot of people have been interested in, like these themes of God, how we call things truth, new age stuff, psychedelics, sex, like all this stuff is combined into this very bad example of like portraying something as truth and culty stuff too, right? So um before we dive in, I feel like I should give everybody, or we should give everybody, a bit of a overview in case they haven't listened to the podcast we're referencing. So,
Okay.
um, the we're going to be talking about Aubrey Marcus. So, if you don't know who any of these people are, I don't really think it matters too much. I didn't know who Aubrey Marcus was really until I started looking at all of this. It's just it's just a really good example of all of these different dynamics that we've
Yeah.
talked about. So um but so the reason this all came to a head and has been such a big thing um is because Aubrey Marcus, who's this like famous, this is just my perception of him, kind of like spiritual bro, psychedelic guy, like grew up with a lot of money, it seems like, made a lot of money doing weird like fleshlight, the fleshlight stuff, which is like a, or maybe that
Yeah.
was his dad. I don't know, just sex toy
Yeah.
thing. He had like a failed business for male nail polish.
Yeah.
Just yeah, I was looking him up and I was like, why do I know this guy's name? And then when I found that, he called it like Alpha Nail or something. And when I found that, I was like, oh, Jordan, this is that guy. Because I had looked it up. I found that a couple years ago somehow. So, uh, but you can, if anybody doesn't know who he is, just picture, I'm sure he's on TRT. Like he's got big muscles now. He has tattoos. He like does psychedelics all the time. He has a very big brand, very
Yeah.
popular, ran some sort of spiritual breathwork. He's like a healer, poet, warrior, whatever. So we'll go more into him. But so he's kind of the main character here. And
Yeah.
then uh he had in this pod, so he released a podcast with him, two other women, and then their spiritual teacher, their relationship coach. So the two other women, one is his wife. So he had been dating this woman, Whitney, before, who I'm sure we'll touch on. And she is they opened their relationship. She opened their relationship because at his encouragement. They had an open relationship, and then he met this new woman who's on this podcast, Vyana, and he was all into Vyana, and then decided Vyana didn't want anything to do with the polyamory stuff he was into, and so he ended up proposing to her. I think within 2 weeks, he said, if I didn't mishear that, uh they got married and he came out saying he's now all into monogamy. So he there picture this like spiritual bro, polyamorous, woohoo, drugs, all these things saying like I'm now all about monogamy. This is the way to be. And I actually have heard clips of him. I've spent so many hours of my life this week learning more about Aubrey Marcus than I thought I would ever need to know. Um, seen clips of him speaking about like when he's monogamous, speaking about his polyamorous self pretty negatively and showing like what he learned, you know? And so I and so he was supposed to be married to this woman. So Vylana, Aubrey Marcus is 44, Vylana is 38. Uh and now they're introducing us to this new girl who apparently has been around for now maybe the last 2 years or so. They're coming out publicly about it to share. Her name is Alana, so sounds very similar to Vylana, looks very similar. She's just 10 years younger. So she's 28. they really are very similar in a lot of ways. Kind of looks like Alana could be their daughter. So Vylana, the wife, is like she sings beautiful singing bowls. She's Hawaiian, all this. That's kind of her thing. Alana was a model, and uh, we'll go into. Well, so they met because uh, Aubrey was at the gym. They had already decided, Aubrey had convinced Vylana that maybe they should play around. They shouldn't stay completely monogamous. They should have other people come into the relationship. So he's on this app called Raya, which I had never heard of, but apparently it's like a dating app for famous people or something like that. And so Aubrey gets a message from God in the middle of his workout telling him to go on Raya because there is someone there who will be very important to him. And he goes on, he sees Alana, he reaches out to her and tells her this, and they just connect. And so now Alana gets brought into the relationship, and it's all well and good until the three of them go on a trip to Egypt where they go to the temple of Isis, and Aubrey is standing inside the temple of Isis, and he hears Isis say to him, "You are meant to have children with both of these women." So it's a direct message from God, Isis. Aubrey seems to use all of these words interchangeably. God, spirit, Isis, the feminine goddess, all these things seem to be one to him. And so he got this direct message from spirit telling him he needs to have children with both women. That is their destiny, their dharma, which is a key concept that they've been working on with Marc Gafni, their spiritual teacher. There is going to be so much we have to say about Marc Gafni. So they released this podcast telling everybody about Alana, how she's become a part of this, and seems like planning on having children with both of them. And they're presenting all of this through Marc Gafni, this relationship coach Eros guy, which there's just so many parts of this for us to go very deep into.
Yeah.
He joins the podcast to frame everything in such a light to show everybody that they are really just, they've found this new evolved form of love called radical monogamy. So that's what they're doing. They're not doing polyamory because it's much bigger and more spiritual and evolved than that. It's radical monogamy. So why don't I stop there because I've been talking for a bit. You fill in any gaps you think we might need or anything, and then I think I'd like to start by talking about Gafni. But why don't you, if there's anything I missed or anything you want to like fill in?
Yeah. Yeah, so the past podcast you and I did was about my time in the polyverse, in the
Yeah.
kink world and the alternative relationship world. And Aubrey Marcus, just so that we point out his relevance and influence, he and Joe Rogan were partners, and they opened this gym called On a Gym. It's huge here in Austin. It's its own being. Later fell out and split up for whatever reasons, and so his like branch of influence is up there. And in the kink world, like he was one of the very open examples with Whitney of what open relating looked like, um, and what the philosophies were like, and they were doing podcasts constantly around that. She never wanted to be open like Vylana. And so I think it's relevant also, and I hope we touch on it, that like this isn't a man going into an open community and dating people who are like, this is what I want to. It's going into monogamous women and influencing them to open in this like very spiritual fashion and very public fashion. So outside of that, he's got tons of supplements. He's in the health industry, and I think that's about it. Oh, I believe he just wrote a book, and he and Marc Gafni wrote it together. I missed that in the podcast, but was listening to it again just before our meeting, and it actually sounds like they wrote it together. I think it's called the
Gafni's book, but it says forward by Aubrey Marcus. So I don't know how much like maybe yeah, they did kind of present it as their thing, so
I think
I
Aubrey
don't
maybe
know.
made some poems for it because he read this one poem about monogamy that was just like one body forever in like
Yeah.
a different interview. Because the weird thing is how they layered this. So he and Vailana used to do podcasts about their relationship. Each one was like quite tortured, weird energy. Around Vylana that is like a whole other subject, kind of like putting her insecurities on the spot for interest in the name of evolution of the feminine.
Yeah.
And this is the first one they've done in a while, and they did not mention they were open, and so they did this with Marc Gafni, introducing all of them basically and talking about how strong and good their relationship is and their journey through their relationship monogamously. And so this was like a few months ago. This is not even that long ago.
Oh.
Yeah, very confusing. And then they were like, and surprise, we're actually not monogamous by posting this picture of them all at Burning Man with different partners. And so it was very like, oh, okay, that's happening. Even that feels like kind of manipulative in a way because they're introducing Marc Gafni and his philosophy very superficially and introducing their relationship as an example of a successful relationship, and that's when Aubrey reads his poem, which was like, oh, that's an interesting poem to read around your monogamous relationship about like being tortured around the one body you get to have forever. And yeah, so outside of that, I think you did well. Marc Gaffney, we can get into his details.
So if anybody wants, so if I would say, if you have the time and you want to go watch the whole podcast, like I'll link it here. And if you don't want to watch the whole thing, I would say you don't have to watch it at all. But if you do, I feel like you can watch the first 10 to 15 minutes and basically you've watched the whole thing. Like you'll get the feel of the people. It is a pot, you can listen to it. I actually watched the video because it's just, you can see them all, you know, so you can see their expressions and their how they're speaking. Um, so I'll say that for anyone in case they want to know more of what we're discussing. But so Gaffney is fascinating to me because I think that not that he's been the sole contributor to this because like you said obviously Aubrey's been doing this, he's been convincing other women to do this for a while, but and at first when I watched it for a while I thought both women seem very sweet. Um, and I thought Aubrey seemed pretty sweet. Like I couldn't tell for a while. I was like, is he just dumb? Like Jordan would say, underfathered, just sort of like a bumbling boy, hasn't grown up? Or is he manipulative and controlling, or both? What do you think? Do you think he's like,
I think that, the vibe I got from the podcast is very similar to when I was in college and I'd be like around, I did not like cocaine, but I'd be around people that were doing cocaine and it would be like they're just fueled in this dopamine energy, kind of addicty energy of like, we're gonna change the world. Like this is it. Like we're gonna be it's like I see the innocence like in it to some degree. And I think when you do enough drugs, like that's kind of the wave you're used to riding, and everything in your life maybe has to have that vibration to feel interesting. But I do think that there is a manipulative, dark aspect to it now that he's brought in Gaffney. It's like he wasn't enough to convince his partners to open in this beautiful way anymore. And so now he's brought in like this next level of spiritual, philosophical um, influence to kind of justify for these women opening up. And I don't know much about Alana, but Alana has been so public. She never wanted to be open when they got married. That was very much, she was like, no, like maybe we'll talk about monogamish one day, but it's not because I want to, It's just to have
yeah,
it on the table. And so I have no problem with them. Actually, up until this episode, I was a fan of their life. I liked that regardless of what they were doing, they seemed to be pretty honest about it, just kind of doing their best. They have these huge, they just finished making them, but it's called Fit for Service, like giant retreats for couples and for people. Like I kind of liked what they stood for, which was just making the world a better place. And I think you can get every cult has gone down that path where I think you can
Yeah.
get lost in really kind of basic primal instincts, cultural wiring, like the pursuit of youth or purity, which he brings up, and use all your decades of language and philosophy to manipulate your environment to really support you having something that might just be another branch of your addictive tendencies.
Yeah. I started to wonder throughout if Aubrey was more calculated than I had initially thought when I first started watching. And also just seeing the things his ex has started putting out now
Yeah.
about just like spiritual narcissists and these kinds of things. I'm like, okay, there's clearly a lot there. And I do think so with Gaffney, now he's their teacher. It was kind of alarming throughout the episode how it sounded like the only person they've really gone to for advice who's been framing the whole thing for them, giving them language, helping them through it, is this guy who has been accused of sexual assault, right? With these younger women. He was 19.
Molestation, I believe,
I
yeah.
think when he was 19, he was with a 14 and a 15-year-old maybe, and they spoke out about that. And then when he was 32, he was with a 16-year-old.
And he was a youth
Um,
pastor, which I think is really
right,
important.
when he was a youth pastor, both
Yeah.
times.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a big, so he used to be a rabbi. So this is the weirdest thing too to me because they still call him like rabbi. Like, is that are they still calling him or is that a different name?
Maybe, maybe.
Like
I
Aubrey
didn't,
still refers to him as like Rabbi Mark sometimes. And I don't know if that's the same, but this guy used to be a rabbi and had his rabbi certification revoked because of his predatory behavior with his the children coming to his under
yeah.
his
And I believe one of the centers he was at even closed. And then there's a Dr. Phil interview because he took a lie detector test, and that's basically what had him be able to be like, see, I didn't have sex with them. But on the Dr. Phil interview, he's like, well, we kissed and we did everything but sex. Did you watch the interviews?
I watched that bit you had sent me with him on Dr. Phil, but I don't think it said the whole maybe I didn't watch like a
Oh my God,
long
it's
version.
nuts. I couldn't even find the whole long one, just little clips. And Dr. Phil is like, this isn't looking good for you. Like, because he's like, I'm just trying to tell you my truth. And he's like, I don't know if you think this is going well for you, but like kissing and like touching, it's the same, you know? And it was really hard to watch. But it's also interesting that they chose this man as their guide because on some level, it's the voice of God still coming through all of them to justify this way of being instead of just I want to establish that like if you want to be poly, like I have no problem, be poly, you know. There was just like and maybe I should have brought this up at the beginning. One of the reasons this is such an interesting cultural kind of phenomena right now is because there have been thousands of people that were poly. Aubrey has been poly before publicly. Nobody has, it hasn't caused this giant of a ripple effect with so many people coming out and being like, no, I don't know what that was. Even poly people coming out and being like, don't lump us in with that. Like, there was something else going on here energetically and philosophically that feels like really unclean and manipulative. And they're all using this voice of truth and God to justify it instead of just like, this is what we're going to do and come along for the ride if you want. And there's this like extra now branch of like this ex voice of God coming in, also giving them the tools and language to justify it.
Mhm.
which makes it all feel really shady instead of just like, all right, live your life, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So, Gaffney, they started working with Gaffney because I saw, like, it wasn't originally for relationships, which is also interesting to me. Like, they chose him, I guess, because he was showing them their dharma. That was what I saw. And so dharma, I guess, that's a Sanskrit word, right? Is it for
I think
your
it's
like
Buddhist.
destiny? Buddhist?
Yeah, I should know this. I believe it's karma. We should look this up probably.
I
Yeah.
think that dharma means your like your fate or your life path. Define dharma.
Yeah, I think it's good we do
Indian religion. In Buddha, well, it says it's a Sanskrit word, but it says in Buddhism,
that. Yeah.
the eternal and inherent nature of reality,
Okay,
cosmic
so
law,
another word for truth.
underlying right behavior and social order. So I want to read this quote for people to get a feel of Gaffney and how he speaks and like how he frames things. So let me just quote him for a minute. Uh, so he's giving these frames. This is from the beginning. It's like minute 10 of the episode. And he's framing it for everybody. And I think this is so fascinating to me because he's such a culty guy. Like the way he acts exactly like a cult leader. Like the way that he's so subtly manipulative and he's making sure to set the frames ahead of time. Um the way that he uses words and redefines different words to mean things that he says that they do, and it's like he is telling everybody what to believe while simultaneously doing what they all do, which is saying like he says at one point in the thing, a teacher should never tell you what to do. Like if a teacher tells you what to do, run. And it's like, yeah, that's what all cult leaders will say. They're constantly telling you, I'm not I'm not controlling you. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm not, but they are subtly manipulating you to do exactly what they want to do. And so you can see with these women, uh, truth is so elevated, their trust is so elevated as so important. Like whenever they're trusting, he praises it and they get praised, so they get rewarded for acting in these certain ways uh, that the men want them to act. But so let me just it's just so funny. I was like, when this guy talks, so quote, one more kind of critical frame, which is crazy important. Reality is, we've talked about so much, reality is evolution. That's just true. Reality is evolution means it's a story. It's an evolving story and it's a love story. Reality is not really a fact. It's a story and it's a love story. Reality is relationships. That's just true. Atoms are relationships. Molecules are relationships between parts. So reality is evolution. Reality is relationships. And reality is the evolution of relationships. Reality is that at its core structure, the evolution of relationships. And what moves reality forward from the molecular to the world of animals, of life, to the world of humans is crisis. Every crisis is always a crisis of relationship. It's never not. So every crisis is a crisis of intimacy. You solve a crisis of intimacy by actually reaching for a next and new structure of intimacy. Reality is the progressive deepening of intimacies. So so this is how he talks. And so then he says, like, what we need to do is we need to participate in the evolution of relationship, not to make something better than monogamy. Monogamy should be deep, and monogamy is a deep and beautiful and holy journey. It's a holy and broken hallelujah, but it's not the only journey. And there are other journeys that are sacred and beautiful. And so we go from like, reality is this. So he's telling us over and over, that's just true. Reality is this. You can hear it in the way that he speaks. This is what reality is. And it's like these vague terms that if you are listening and open, he's not really making any sense. But if you're open, you're like, okay, I'm like trying to see how that, like, reality is relationships. Okay, I guess so, right? And somehow you're like saying yes in your head and you're getting led into this place where suddenly we go from reality is relationships, which means reality is the evolution of love, and there's always crisis in that, and somehow this means that we need to move beyond monogamy and end up in this radical monogamy, and that's what reality is, and that's how we're evolving.
Yeah.
And it's spoken in this way and gets you there, and then suddenly it's like, wait, what happened? How did we
Yeah.
even get there?
Yeah. I felt that a lot throughout the podcast where I'd be like,
That's
wait,
how he
what?
speaks. It's nuts.
Yeah. It's really confusing. And it's not confusing in the like, just that doesn't make sense, but it's kind of exactly what you said, where you're following, it's flushed with positivity. And so you're like, okay, I don't get it, but it kind of links to that. And then it's positive, and you're like, all right, I'm trying. And then at the end of it, you're like, wait, how did we get here? I don't know if you noticed, like the first 12 minutes of the podcast, he's literally like, this is not against monogamy. This is actually about monogamy. And monogamy is great, it's fantastic, and you should do it. And then he goes on to describe how monogamy is to blame for like war and death and famine and like everything else on the planet. And you have to do it because of infidelity. But it's actually, it's like, wait, what? Like,
Yeah.
what are you
Monogamy
talking?
is great, but also monogamy never works. And not never, but like most of the time, it doesn't work at all. And people are just cheating behind closed doors.
Yeah.
So, our answer to this, obviously, the only answer to this is
Mhm.
to have radical monogamy. And
Where
it's just like,
you cheat ethically. Yeah, it's like, wait, what? Or you could not cheat. I don't know. I just try it. There's,
I mean, when I was listening to it, I was just like, wait, how do we get here? Like, I don't agree with the premise. There's just this sort of, um, because monogamy doesn't work and people cheat and people have such a hard time in monogamy, that can't possibly mean that we need to work on ourselves in a different way. And that's the other thing is right, they're so, this is all about growth. They're learning so much. This was a major point for me, was that people often excuse relationship problems or staying in a relationship that's not healthy by saying, I'm learning so much here. Like, I'm meant to learn this. And to me, it's always like, you're going to learn from any situation that you're in. And so, is this what you're learning, what you want to be learning? Like, Vylana
yeah,
talks so much about how this relationship is showing her where she's not free, and it's been an initiation, and it's so hard, but it's freeing because it's showing her all of these things, and she's learning so much, and we're growing. And it's like, you're gonna grow and learn. Like,
and
what if you could be in a relationship where you got to grow and learn how to just accept somebody's full love for you and choosing only you? Wouldn't that be a nice thing to learn? Like,
yeah,
why is it that we're having to be stuck in this relationship where we're learning um, things we don't want to be learning? Like, that was how I felt in my last relationship toward the end. I was like, well, I'm learning so much. And it was like, yeah, I'm learning how to settle for things that are making me miserable.
yeah,
Sure,
yeah.
there's growth in that,
That's growth.
but
Yeah,
like, is that what I want to learn?
yeah. And I think that's the other darkness that you can kind of feel in the podcast is so many times with Vylana. There wasn't a single time when she's like, you know what? I've actually been non-monogamous my whole life. This is something I've always been curious about, and I'm just terrified to explore it because I've had people cheat on me. No element of that. There was so many times where she said, I believe there's a direct quote where she's like, this isn't what I want, but it's what I need.
Yeah.
And it's like, what? And then when she talks about monogamy, Gaffney goes on this rant about integrity.
Yeah.
And how this is about integrity and everyone's like utmost like desires and stuff like that, and how without desire a relationship becomes eros less and dies, and it's just like all this stuff. Um and and she's like, I want this imaginary thing, monogamy, but I've never even had monogamy because I've never, and it's like that language is put into you, like if you're a monogamous human being who wants monogamy, who established with this very polyamorous person that you were not going to be polyamorous from the start, like a very clear boundary from a woman who's obviously done work on herself, and then that's how you've landed, something else is going on. It feels really sinister.
Yeah. Well, she's learned to label that as a fantasy.
Yeah,
Like she's just like, oh, monogamy. Like I've always thought I wanted it, but I guess I don't because I've never had it and I don't even know what it's actually like.
yeah.
So why do I keep thinking that I want it so much? It's
I've
just
been
this
there.
fantasy in my head. What?
I have been there. Like when I was in open, that was the exact justification in my head. I was like, it doesn't work for everyone else. Everybody cheats anyway. And like, I've never even like, I had never been cheated on. I'd been in monogamy, but it was serial monogamy. So is it even monogamy? My partner would say. And I'd be like, well, you're right. It's not actually monogamy because
What?
I'm
Sorry. What do you I
my
just have to be a normal person and be like,
please, please, please. Oh
say
yeah,
that
this is why
again.
it's a breakdown. So serial monogamy is when you go from relationship to relationship and
Right. So
claim
that's
your
not
monog.
actually monogamy.
So if someone's manipulating you, it's monogamy if you think it's monogamy. If you're like, I'm looking for my one person and I want that one person, then it's monogamy. You're just practicing monogamy until you find your person. But if somebody's trying to manipulate you and being like, see, that's not even real monogamy. That's you wanting novelty and just leaving because you want the novelty. It's very, very confusing
Right.
when you're in a state of crisis with somebody. And with Vylana and Aubrey, God, there's so much to go into around this particular thing. Where he's like, and this isn't about financial, control. I've told her she can leave and I'll take care of her, which is like you committed to her under monogamy. Like there's just
Well, this is the other thing to name for people is Aubrey has a ton of money. So that's
very
another piece. And I couldn't stand during the episode, they're like, they make sure to point out multiple times we would all be doing this even if we were poor.
real awkward, real weird. Like,
It was just so, because it was like, no, first of all, no, you wouldn't.
yeah,
All
no, you
these
wouldn't.
both these women are gonna be fighting over you, wanting to be with you if you all have no money, no
I'm
chance.
busy. Yeah, no.
But I think it's worth naming because Aubrey, I don't, he sold the On It thing or whatever for billions of dollars. So he already had trust fund money, it sounds like. So he has just many millions of dollars. I don't know how many. So he's set up. And so that's also a thing. Like for Vylana to leave, she's leaving all of that. This marriage where she's been really set up, this particular lifestyle. For Alana, it's quite attractive in that way, I'm sure, as well. So that's like another dynamic that's at
Yeah.
play.
Yeah, and it's an important one that I think we could do an entire podcast on because it's so complicated. Like and I've been conflicted on this particular point for a while. Like the level of responsibility that comes with your power and position in society.
Yeah.
Um, and there's another guy we should talk about afterwards because it'd be kind of interesting to dissect because that was like the whole reason he got taken down is like everyone was like, you need to be aware of the role that plays in influencing someone younger or someone who's in need or something like that. And it's I think as a society something we should look at where before it was kind of like whatever, an old man with a younger woman is normal. I, I think there is more playing out here.
Mhm.
Especially like when I think we talked about this in our past podcast as well. When you're a young girl and that's as mature as you've ever been,
Yeah.
you think you're peak maturity. But when you look back on your life and you're looking at the old men who like pursued you, it's like, blah, like it's a reverse violation of supposedly consented to, but can you really consent if you don't understand the position you're being put in? And to some degree, I think that applies to his position in the world. He has an empire. So there's so much more than just the podcast. His parents were rich. And this isn't really about Aubrey for me either. It's more just about like their characters. They get to do whatever they want, but it's like there's so much playing out here culturally
Yeah.
that has been just okay for so long and doesn't feel like it is anymore.
Hmm.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And I hear people too say, like, there's also a second way, but we don't want to infantilize the women and like say that they don't have agency because they're 28 and 38, and Vylana is very clear, I'm choosing this, I'm choosing this. But it's also like, I don't know. Like, when you're being, and this is a question that keeps coming up for me too, is when you're being manipulated, how much agency, like, how much responsibility do you have for your own behavior?
Very good question. There's this point where she says, like, we were in so much love because Aubrey, coming from this really loving place, because Aubrey wouldn't let me like succumb to my trauma and not consider that like I could be open, and it's like, what? Like there's so much fucked up in that. Like you're immediately assuming it's your trauma, not
Yeah.
your desire. There's just like I think the reason it's important that this be bigger than these individuals who we don't know is because if my daughter was talking like that, I would be like, oh no, something. If she was like, I'm just curious about polyamory, I'd be like, all right, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I can support you the best of my capacity, and that I hope want more for you, but it's organic and it's natural and there's a clarity in it, regardless of her age. I think it's the language in a lot of this that is like something is wrong here. Something is
Yeah.
terribly, terribly wrong.
And it
You
was amazing, all the comments. Like, I was really surprised. We seem to have gotten to a point culturally.
Yeah,
I was really surprised that I only basically saw negative comments.
yeah.
Comments that were not in support, that were just like, something is wrong.
And some of the only people that supported it are like his ex girlfriend. I don't know if she's in the lifestyle or not, but just like people who are their immediate friends who I'm assuming already have been supporting it. They had to turn off their YouTube comments because there was a mob that was created and it was picking up steam. And then I believe like someone threatened them or broke into their home or something.
Yeah.
So he said he turned it off. But I mean, even that seems new. I don't know. I've just never heard of that happening anywhere. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, it's really crazy.
People were seeing, I was surprised people were seeing it and they were very clearly calling out what they saw and they were seeing it very clearly. And I was like, wow, we're at this point in society where people are really, they can see through these dynamics. I think, I think everything with narcissists, people are starting to understand narcissism more and see how narcissists operate. And even that, like when I was researching all of the cult stuff, that's still just being understood. Like there are only a couple colleges, like universities in the world where you can get a PhD or mat in coercive control.
It's
Um,
so surprising.
well, it's new. It's just like such a new field that they're exploring. And so it's very much on the up. Like it's growing. We're learning more about it and people are starting to be like, "Oh, coercive control is a thing. It's like very prevalent everywhere. What does this mean? How does it work? How do these dynamics work?" Because what this one woman used to say that I'd worked with for a time was coercive control is like it's death by 1,000 paper cuts. So
Mm,
it's not so clearly abusive in this way where it's like, well, he hit me or
right.
like he did this thing, this one thing happened. There's very rarely a one incident. It's a period of years usually where there's so many tiny little manipulations and deceptions and twists and it compiles to the point where people end up being so traumatized from it and they can't look back and be like, well, it was that, like, he did
Mhm.
this. It's
Yeah.
like, no, he manipulated my entire mind and reality for years.
And there's so many spiritual teachers that are like, narcissism isn't real. And I think it's as dangerous as what Marc Gafni is doing, like monogamy, like repurposing the word monogamy for polyamory. Like, I think that words matter because they allow us to fully consent. And if we start mixing up words or eliminating their meaning, people are confused about what they're really saying yes to. And narcissism is like a brain state. You can literally measure it. And it's I think it's an important thing that we educate people on, because it's not like, oh, my ex is just a narcissist and that's like just what we say when we're lazy. Like there's a clear deterioration of the person dating a narcissist, depending on the scale. And there's this clear charm that comes with most narcissistic people that tend to have these really high highs. Like it's such a complex relationship because the narcissist is also one of the most charming people you'll ever meet in your life. And so it's these dichotomies of having your reality consistently molded to this like extremely high experience that's inconsistent as well, which is what keeps you in abusive relationships anyways, those inconsistent rewards. And then not being able to really know what's going on because everyone's like, that's not even a real thing. And it is a real thing.
Mhm.
And it takes a very real recovery when you've left. You know, like the narcissistic personality recovery, if you've like dated one, is like 2 to 3 to 7 to 10 years. It's
Yeah.
insanity. It's, and the reason that the statistics are so low is because unless they're going to therapy to keep their partner around, which is another manipulation, um, not even evil. It's just when you don't have empathy, your goals around what you're getting in life are different. And they can be really innocent, which is confusing. It can be really honest, but they're not the same as a person without the narcissism. And if you don't understand that, you're being manipulated again, you know? And so we don't have narcissists organically going to therapy, and we don't have the numbers and statistics to reflect just how much narcissism there is. And we're in a society that very much encourages that approach, especially pre-relationship, as a way to be successful. And it's this perfect storm to just kind of breed that personality disorder.
Mhm. I think you can have too, something that was significant for me to understand was that there can be innocent narcissists, like you said, where like they're not malicious, and then there can be narcissism that comes along with like like being a
Yeah.
sociopath and a psychopath.
Yeah.
And so there are narcissists that are intentionally malicious and they know exactly what they're doing and they're doing it on purpose.
Yeah.
And then there's narcissists that might not really be fully aware of it, I think, but they're still causing harm
Yeah.
by being a narcissist.
Yeah, and there's a spectrum. We're all on the spectrum, and it can be aggravated depending on our life. But NPD, the personality disorder, is developmental. There's no cure for it. They had it as a child. Their brain literally cannot feel empathy. And so the extent of that with the individual matters.
Yeah.
Like a vulnerable narcissist, well, we could go into just narcissism as its own podcast, but the innocence, I think, like the really malicious one, horrible, don't wish that on anyone, really fucking terrible. The innocent one is just as confusing because it comes from a place of that person like really wanting love, really wanting a relationship, really wanting the things in life that other people love, and just not being able to achieve outside of emulation, so like faking it, that that reality for themselves. So it ends up just leading to lying and manipulation because they're in pursuit of what we all want without the language of who they are.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really eloquent way of putting it. They can't see outside of themselves. Everything is in relation to, like, It's all about me.
Yeah.
And other people don't really exist in the same way that they do for, like, people who are not
Yeah.
that.
And you know what's interesting is like this isn't saying they don't deserve love, but if
Yeah.
we're educated on the importance of like owning who we are and the truth, then there's a codependent out there who's just like looking for their their version of that narcissist who can consent to being in that relationship because they feed into each other just enough that it feels actually balanced.
Yeah.
But knowing what they're getting into with that person is what would cause that relationship to be functional versus dysfunctional. Because if you are with a narcissist and you don't know, the tools you're using are inappropriate. If you're using the tools you'd use in a normal relationship with
Yeah.
someone with NPD, you need something different. So it brings us back to this the importance of words in our guiding. Like the tools you need for monogamy are completely different than what you need for polyamory. The words are important. That distinction is important. Saying it's not, they're like, God, if only we'd seen other examples of this in society. And it's literally like, what? Because Whitney, Aubrey's ex, was a relationship coach. And I interviewed her once, and she had there are thousands of books on polyamory, non-monogamy, monogamish, that thousands of people willing to talk about how it works for them. That it feels like you're crazy when someone who's been the face of that for society is claiming there is no face of that.
Yeah, well, there is no face of radical monogamy.
Fair enough. Radical monogamy, polyamory is
So
new.
they've been manipulated to feel like they're breaking ground. They're evolving reality. Reality is the evolution of love, and we are evolving and growing and creating radical monogamy. There were two other things that Gaffney kept saying in relation to words and terms. First of all, this use that is everywhere in this new age polarity, whatever worlds of eros, it does not mean like what eros meant originally in Greek was that it starts as a kind of erotic love with a person, but it evolves and like the purpose of it is it's passion for God. Like it's supposed to bring you close to God. And instead, they've like taken this word and redefined it to be like it's just erotic love. And I'm this, what did Aubrey say? I'm a stallion full of eros or something. And I just, yeah, stallion of eros. He literally used that phrase about himself seriously. And it's like they're using these terms to be like it sounds fancy and it becomes this code for the erotic and excuse for being polyamorous and just needing multiple partners because I'm just so full of eros, which is this erotic, fancy, ancient quality. And it's like, no, it was never, that was not what that word meant. It was not meant to keep you just having sex with all of these different people.
Yeah.
And then the other thing he said a bunch, which I just couldn't get over, and I quoted it in my quote of him, is how much Gafni kept saying, it's a holy and broken hallelujah. He must have said that phrase like 18 times throughout the episode, and he's taking it from the song, but that was another thing he did. And so this is like where I think I get so full of excitement because years ago, like when I was in the cult, because being open and trusting was so valuable, like the more trusting you could be right away was so rewarded, and it is so rewarded in a lot of these spiritual spaces. You listen to things without real discernment. You might think you're having discernment, but you're just open because you're trying to be as open as I can. And so everything somebody says, you're just taking it and being like, okay, that could be true. Yeah, okay, like I'm receptive. I'm being receptive. And now I've become so skeptical that listening to this guy talk, it was like every sentence he would say, I'd be like, wait, pause. I need to like pause and be like, I'm sorry, excuse me, explain this. And so he kept doing this with this, it's a holy and broken hallelujah, and he's taking it from the song, and he is using it to say that, he's saying that relationships are hard and love is so difficult and love is a holy and broken hallelujah. And so it's, of course, because it's holy and broken, it's full of all these hard times and love is just so difficult. And he brings this up over and over again, but that's not what that means either, because the song is about God and life. It's like life is holy and broken, but he pulls these things out, and because they're like words like eros that have a history to them, or this song that it's so popular and everybody knows it, it gives it status. So he's like, when he uses it to explain something, he uses it to justify this radical monogamy situation because monogamy is not working. Anytime they're having a hard time, he's like, "Oh, it's a holy, you're holy and broken, hallelujah," and they just you he accepts it. The more times he says it over and over again, your brain just will, their brains will just accept it and be like, yeah, oh yes, I'm, what I'm doing is, this is my holy and broken hallelujah. And of course, yeah, I'm in pain and I don't like that my partner's seeing somebody else, but it's my holy and broken hallelujah. And it's like, wait, how are we using this to mean this? This is not even what it meant.
Um, yeah, he does that a lot. He does that with statistics as well, where he uses this really old statistic number around marriage, 70% of divorce, of marriage ending in divorce, which is no longer accurate. It's now 40. So like that's 30% better than when that statistic was around, which I think must have been a few years ago, maybe even like 5 to 10 years ago, because it's a statistic I was trained around in marriage. And he uses that to literally say like, this is the medicine for cheating and war, because this many people, instead of it that just being a statistic around marriage, it becomes a statistic around world misery and how it leads to like the demise of all humanity. And it's kind of like, again, it's kind of like the song. It's using these like little snippets of information or memory that people have to manipulate these massive points and make them just like run of the mill part of the conversation. When it's like, whoa, if we slowed you down there and had you break down your logic, like you're actually not saying what you're saying, you're saying. You're actually saying monogamy is trash. It's going to lead to infidelity and world war. Like, those are each huge things we should talk about honestly. Because
Mm-hmm.
if you truly believe them, there's probably merit in some of the things you believe we could learn from, but not when you're painting it in this song.
No, Gaffney, I'm very comfortable saying I think Gaffney is very conscious of exactly what he's doing.
Yeah,
I
I
think
think
he's
Gafni is a different breed.
manipulative on purpose. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's playing it out. And I'm sure, I'm sure they're paying him tons of money
Yeah.
as their guide and their teacher and their coach and whatever. And I also went back and saw that it seems like Gaffney, maybe he didn't enter at this point, but it seems like the turning point in he and Aubrey's relationship happened when Aubrey's dad died.
Um,
And so I think my thought is, it kind of seems like Gaffney was there and a huge support when his dad died and sort of has become this like father figure,
mhm.
teacher role. And in Aubrey's video, he has a video on his Instagram now that it's like a reel that introduces him and who he is as a person. And something he says is that he's in the lineage of cosmo-erotic humanism and in the lineage of the wisdom of Solomon through Marc Gafni. And so Gafni is the one who is like, he's his teacher for cosmoerotic humanism and the wisdom of Solomon. And I imagine that the wisdom of Solomon is referring to the Songs of Solomon in the Bible, which is like the chapter that's all full of sexual like speak. But just like a lot of these new agey things, especially cult leaders, they take on this, I'm in the lineage of this. And it means nothing. Who Marc Gafni gave you he's this, is he the originator? Did he have teachers of the lineage of whatever? Like, it's just so, it's crazy to me.
I think it's like our craving to be connected to something that feels so important that it could define history in the way that Christ has.
Yeah.
And whether that's priesthood or, you know, lineages or ritual like that, I feel like that's like the part of us that's willing to not question and to be like, feed this part of me that is disconnected from our source.
Yeah.
And then add drugs to that, and God knows. how far you'll go, you
Well,
know?
that's the other crazy. Yeah, another thing he said in that video was he was like, "My life is an example. I'm an example of what happens when you uh just take psychedelics." I don't know the sentence he used, but it was essentially like take psychedelics over and over and over and over again. And he was saying it as like as if this is a good thing. Like I'm a testament to what happens when you take psychedelics all the time. And I was like, yes, you
It
are.
shows.
I
Yeah.
was like, that is exactly what you are.
Yeah.
Because it's great. It's like, and it sounded like too, and this is the part where it also gets kind of sketchy, is like, I think with him and Vyana, they have their thing called the God Bomb, some sort of healing treatment. I think it includes psychedelics, if I'm
It does.
not. Yeah?
5-MeO,
Huh?
5-MeO is the psychedelic. I think it's like the God experience. I don't know the
Okay.
details of it, but yeah.
But they talked about it because they gave that to Alana. So like Alana and they talk about this in the podcast episode. Again, it's this place where trust is so elevated as like the highest standard. They say with this awe how trusting Alana was.
Yeah, she's like,
How
you didn't even know us.
yeah.
You
She
like
was like, you
took
didn't
it.
even know us and you just came and you took this like we gave like it sounds like they gave her these psychedelics and they did this whole thing with her and she was just so trusting. She had just met them. And Alana makes me just like I hear so much of my past self in her, like the way that she speaks about, she's like, well, I know, she's very adamant over and over that she knows truth in her body. She can feel truth. She knows truth. And um, she, that's why she trusted them right away. And that's why she trusts this whole thing that they're going on, even though it sounds kind of crazy. And even though she's having a hard time not being able to sleep in the same bed as her partner and all these things that she's missing out on, she knows the truth in her body. And I just feel like myself in the cult being like, I know the truth, like I can trust the truth. And it's like you might have a really good sense of truth and that can be manipulated.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that. And I don't think she realizes that. And it just made me like, it was so painful for me to, I was just like, oh, it just, somebody else can manipulate that so easily.
Yeah. And I think this kind of comes back to like power, influence, and position and age. Like these things that like, as a woman growing up, you and I were exposed to like younger women dating older rich men is normal. That's going to make it seem less weird when we see it. And it's part of culture and yada yada. But there's like, I just had a daughter and I'm definitely going to be talking about these dynamics early on. If Aubrey and Vylana were a poor couple who were like, come do drugs with us. Do you think she would have been like, yeah, okay, no, like, hopefully, maybe, I mean, if she's suicidal, but like, there's something to be said about the willingness that someone's positioning age and money has on a female specifically in society. Um, and and I don't know what level of responsibility I'm craving from men in that position. Because I don't foresee that going away anytime soon, but there is something, and maybe it's like a self-awareness. At one point when he talks about purity, I'm like, oh God, we've seen this. So, like, no, this is like, he's talking about something very real. I heard this one father talk about it, and he's like, yes, there is purity there. We all can like see the purity in someone young. Like that is not new. And with Aubrey, like, there's this. Uh, okay, I hesitate to say this, but it's like there's this, he's talking about this protective, like, part of him coming out. And there's a part of me that's like, that's probably like your paternal instinct to like protect the youth. But instead of protecting her, you're fucking her and
Yeah.
you're like robbing her of what maybe she wants. And it's like, do that. If she's a willing yes and you're a willing yes, you guys are entitled to this and like own it. You know, he's like, I'm not pigeonholing you, but you are the archetype of all purity. It's like, that is so much to put on. I would have been, it's love bombing. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? At
Well,
28,
imagine being told
whatever.
that as a woman in your 20s, like these two very rich, beautiful, older people are telling you that you are the holder of purity and your energy is just so powerful and so pure. They constantly are telling her that.
It's crazy. And she had just left when she met Aubrey, she just left her modeling career. So if you consider just the psychological like combination of all of it, this other guy who was talking about it, he's like, I'm a father, and it's like I can feel what Aubrey's feeling, but I you can do something with that emotion that isn't like want to like have sex with it and trap it in a way. And he also mentioned this other kind of interesting, he's a psychologist, and he's like, obviously, this is just using them as examples of what's possible. Again, not knowing the intimate details of their relationship behind closed doors. But to some extent, it can look like a type of grooming that he's like looped Lana into because
Yeah.
at some point, even Gaffney's like, well, you know, you all have purity. Like, even Gaffney is like, let's back it up there. You know, like we all have purity at one time because there's something that sounds quite sinister with him being like, you are it. You are the thing that makes me want to bring out my sword and just goes on this rant of this like masculine protective energy that structures the entire universe. You know, that's a
Well,
lot.
and it sounds like Vylana's now also been manipulated to kind of feel like she's framed it, maybe even in her own mind manipulated as like because you can start to do that yourself too when you're in these dynamics. Like you start to tell yourself the thing, like you manipulate yourself almost in the ways that you're being manipulated by the narcissist. And it sounds like she now needs Alana near her all the time when she's singing because
Yeah.
Alana's energy just brings her deeper.
Yeah. Yeah. I can only imagine the types of conversations that have like land there. You know what I mean? If I thought that I needed a person near me to be my best self, lover, friend, parent, we would be looking at like, there's something up. We probably
Mm-hmm.
need to get you some therapy, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's not like, oh, okay, so we're just gonna make sure they're there forever next to you. That also sounds like it's been wired to some degree,
Mm-hmm.
which drugs can allow, you know, kind of
Well,
like.
what do you think about the whole God messages from God thing?
Mhm.
Because I think that that goes along with this too. Like when Violana's talking about it, she's like, "Well, I felt Alana's soul in this moment," and like the way that Aubrey talks about, I got these messages from God telling me to do these things. This message from Isis. They're constantly saying they check in with God and they feel that this is their path, their divine path that they're supposed to be on. And yeah, I'm curious what you.
I think it's dangerous because
Yeah.
it positions the experience as not like, look, I felt like this was a message from God. I'm open to being wrong, blah, blah, blah. It's kind of like, I know God in my body, and God came and told me, if you disagree with me, you disagree with God. And I saw in some comments, Aubrey being like, that's not what I was saying. But it actually is multiple times what most of them are saying.
Yeah.
And if you say it enough, you know, it kind of, especially if the whole culture you're involved in is agreeing with you. We have seen this in the spiritual communities we were in, just like this is spirit, this is truth, this is the feminine. And you eventually learn to associate a feeling of like knowing with truth, but it's very conditioned and it has you know, okay, that's the only access to truth is that like particular vibration or feeling. And so, yeah, I think it's eh, tale as old as time to some degree. Like it's been done over and over again, and that it's intoxicating, and that drugs are a huge aspect of it. You know, like ecstasy lights up the part of your brain that lights up when you pray. Like these things are connected, but one of them you can manipulate through chemical, and the other one you can access through practice. And I guess it just depends what you believe reality is. But if you're not doing drugs and you're listening to this and you're feeling the mismatch of like what are you guys talking about? that I think is the biggest signifier to me that there's something else going on here and that this isn't God. And using so many religions interchangeably. I think he mentioned they were doing drugs at the temple. I might be wrong there, and it was just a guided experience or whatever. But even that felt like, nah, like I don't know, like off. Like, and then God came to you and told you to impregnate these two women and like break your commitment to biology. It just it feels messy and sticky. And like, why?
Mm-hmm.
Like, are you the next Jesus? Like, it's just there's so much implied in in the statements.
Yeah, the drugs are an interesting factor just because psychedelics make you so much more suggestible. And
Yeah.
so, like, the CIA would study LSD and stuff like that because you can influence people when they're under the influence of these drugs. It just makes them so much more suggestible to things that they would not normally be otherwise. And so, I just think it's interesting that, like, they're constantly taking all these drugs. Who knows what's getting said to them while they're tripping? Like, that's an interesting part of it as well. But I think with the God stuff, that, like, I've been in these situations too, in all these different communities where it's like, oh, this is a message from spirit, this is a message from, and I mean, where I've come to now is through a very Christian lens, but to me it's just like, we are so influenceable by so many dark spiritual things all the time. And I think that that's such a downfall of the new age world, is that we're just like open to spirit and open to whatever. And we have no idea what kinds of energies can be coming in and telling us things. And so he doesn't know, like, when you start using all of these terms, like, oh, it's all God, and like anything communicating with me spiritually is some aspect of God.
Yeah.
Uh, what if it's a demon telling you that and like pretending to be God? You know, how do you know? And something that um I've liked a lot about Christian stuff is like, they'll say, like, you might feel like you hear things from God, but God, it's always going to be aligned with scripture. And so that's a way to kind of be
Mm.
able to tell, like, is this really God, or am I being tricked? Am I like, because you can't trust yourself to just know. Like, I don't really think we're capable of that. And I know a lot of people say, oh, like, I do so much energy work and I know which are demons and which are not. I think we are very susceptible to all kinds of spiritual attack and weird dark energy things that we don't understand. And I think when we start opening ourselves up to them and think that we can somehow, like, we're equal players in this game, I think there's so much more going on than we have awareness of.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. And I think what would make someone trustworthy if they were like, I know in my body, is the humbleness of being like, and I could be wrong. Like,
Yeah,
and this
totally.
could be something equally as powerful and influential. You know, I've been studying Mary Magdalene, and the philosophy is that she's kind of the lost branch of faith because she teaches like it's inside of you. So there's very much this innate, you don't need the external to know what's true. But I think even in that there is also a like you'll be shown. It's not that you're right you've decided you know God and now you know everything. It's like you'll be shown if it was the right or not by like trusting it, moving through it, but with the humbleness of knowing that your the complexities of your humanity are here to guide you around like what is true and what isn't without ever really getting you to a place of being like I know everything.
I think any spiritual thing, yeah, I think any spiritual thing anybody is going to explore, no matter what religion, or even if it's in the new age world, whatever it's going to be, like, that humbleness should always be there.
Yeah.
And when that goes missing, it's just such a huge red flag.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
that's what you see in these narcissist cult leader type of people,
yeah,
is there's this certainty. I
this
know the
sort
truth. I know this. I heard this. And Aubrey's very careful to say, like, I could be wrong, but it, like, you can tell that he's not actually genuinely trying to discern that.
For me, when he said, like, I would financially take care of her if she didn't want to do this, it was like, I'm going to do this regardless. And
Yeah.
you can stay or leave, and I'll take care of you financially, which, like, is not a direct threat, but it is. It's like, I'm pursuing this.
Yeah.
Basically, I'm leaving you, but you can
Yeah.
stay and, like, we can continue and find a way to make it work. And a lot of the
Either be
language,
okay with me having children with another woman
yeah,
or leave.
yeah. And you can't blame me because I'm going to keep you financially taken care of. And a lot of the language leads me back to being like, is there really freedom, even in the language he's using that implies freedom? Like when she's like, he wouldn't let me succumb to my trauma that said I want monogamy. It's like, what are we saying in that sentence?
Yeah.
Like, it says it all, really. Like, what do you mean he wouldn't let you? Someone who cares about your trauma would respect it, hopefully, and not have you push through it in the name of God and truth and your relationship and resources and all these massive things that has become about instead of actual just monogamy. You know, it's dark. It is sinister. It's very rare that I really struggled the first time to listen to this podcast. I always look forward to their relationship podcasts. Always. It's always got stuff in it for me. But this was like I had to chunk it up. And I've never really experienced that in something like this, unless it's like a really twisted cult, podcast or something where I'm like, that's too dark too soon. But this one was all fluffy. It looked all fluffy. It sounded all fluffy, but it was that same feeling of just like, oh, no.
It was very dark feeling, and I was very hooked in from the beginning. Like at the beginning I was like, "Whoa, I was like, this is just as good as any great cult documentary."
Yeah.
Watching it from this perspective, like I was just like, "Whoa, this is so fascinating."
Yeah.
But it's like 3 hours long. By the time I think I watched maybe an hour or so of it the first day, maybe an hour and a half. Maybe I kind of got through half and then half. But the second half, I was like waiting for it to be over. And then I was so glad when it was over because I was just like, this is a lot.
Yeah.
It's just, it's a lot to feel and witness. And, um, yeah, it made me sad for the women and just, I was just glad that no one seems to be buying it.
Yeah, I hope that it's kind of like when you're friends in an abusive relationship and you can tell them as much as you want, but at the end of the day, they're gonna do what they're gonna need to do to get through that. But at least you spoke up once, it's it kind of feels socially like that, where it's like, oh, we don't have to be okay with like this feels really wrong to a lot of different people
Yeah.
who would normally be supporting this level of like they've clearly gone through every rebellion that could come from society. Is it money because you have too much money? Is it your addiction? Because at the end, he's like, and this isn't about novelty or like the hungry ghost in me, right? And it's like, yeah, you sure? Like,
And then
clearly,
he said he's like, it's not about the Hungry Ghost because I know I'm gonna be happy forever.
oh no, this
Like
was,
as long as we can do this all together, like
yeah,
I'm gonna be happy forever. And I was like, seems really unlikely.
that was a weird statement too, because that almost felt like a statement from a sick person where you're like, that's impossible.
Yeah.
That's impossible. Like, are we teaching that? Like, even what you've just spent 3 hours teaching is that there is no I'm happy forever. Like, it was a very strange sprinkle on there.
And I just wonder, I mean, if you play it out, I mean, I really hope it they don't do it, but like play all of it out. Does he really have children with both of them? What happens when each woman becomes a mother and has a child to protect?
What if the younger one gets pregnant
I was
and
also thinking that.
because so they've been trying to have kids. I don't know if you know this part of their
No, I
story.
don't know.
Aubrey he was an athlete and he was taking testosterone supplements, which can make you infertile. And so they've recently come out saying that he was struggling with that and he's fixing it and they still plan to have children, but that is what's happening. So a lot of the comments were pretty brutal towards them because they were like, it's not the testosterone, it's that you're doing this. Like there's something more divine here. And like my heart goes out to them because that is fucked to receive. And this is like a part of me that I feel guilty feeling this, but a part of me is also like, wow, like maybe there's some clarity to look at here before you start having kids in this situation. You
Wait,
know,
what do you mean you feel guilty for what?
I feel guilt like when I would hear people be like, this is why you can't have kids around
Oh,
what's happening. I don't want to agree with that because it's such a like horrible thing to say to someone struggling with infertility. I don't wish infertility on
oh, got
anybody.
it.
But looking at it spiritually, like my
Yeah.
sense would be like maybe it's just means slow down for a second, you know? And they've obviously been doing this for 2 years. They didn't just start this and then decide to like come out and blow everything up. But it's yeah, there's a lot.
Well, I
Wait, does
think,
that mean that he met her when she was 26? That makes it even grosser. Okay, go on.
oh yeah, Alana, yeah, true.
They keep being like, she's 28. I'm like, I don't know. Me at 26, I was like a teenager,
Yeah, 26, you're still quite,
baby.
you're pretty young still. I think a lot happens between like 26 and 32.
I read somewhere they're trying to push adolescence to extend to 28. So that
Yeah.
doesn't work well for that argument for them. But yeah, just brain developmentally. Like you're not, we're
Mm,
developing slower.
yeah. Well, and I think the whole situation lands so much more like as women in our 30s, there's just this extra pain. Like I was like, oh, I think Vylana just turned 38. Um, but I was like, man, like imagine being the wife, wanting monogamy, wanting kids. You haven't been able to have kids yet. You're nearing 40,
Yeah.
and then a fresh 28-year-old comes into the picture and your husband wants to get her pregnant. Like, ah!
That would hurt. That would hurt. It hurts, I think, every woman that sees it, I think. Especially if it's not a woman that's like, I love non-monogamy. This is my life. I can't wait to live it. It's like there's so much more playing out here in that vein that is like it's tragic, actually tragic. And they're both from Hawaii and they look so similar, like you said. It's like
Yeah, I was wondering that Alana is. I didn't know if Alana was from Hawaii or not. It sounded she had quite a lot of like experience with Hawaii, but she's also
I
Hawaiian.
think they're from the same place. I might be mistaken, but it was a lot of like, oh God.
And then the
It's
other thing it sounds like that keeps like they kept justifying their friendship with each other, sort of, or giving it a like that playing a part as like Vylana would feel hurt, but then she goes to Alana and she's gained this sister and this sisterhood and like in that way they almost end up manipulating each other to stay in this dynamic where it's like you're feeling so hurt by this guy but you can like kind of lick your wounds over here with this woman who will like hug you and tell you that she's not taking anything away from you and it's all
you're
okay.
safe.
And I
Yeah.
kept the main thing for me, this was like such a major piece, was the women kept talking about how much they're sacrificing.
Oh God, that was a whole thing.
And Gaffney kept going on about how they're all sacrificing. And I was like, wait a minute. What is Aubrey sacrificing?
Yeah.
What? Like,
Yeah.
each woman, Vylana was like saying how it's been so hard for her and she's had all this pain, all this stuff come up, all this trauma, whatever. And even Alana, when she gets to speak, she's alone a lot of the time. She wanted this kind of love where someone would, she said, the way I like to be loved is like, cuddled and held and like shown a lot of attention to me and only me. But I've had to give that up. And she says when she's alone, uh she reframes it as like helping her be closer to God or something somehow. Like when she misses
Yeah.
Aubrey or
Yeah.
she wants something different. Yeah, she's like,
What provision am I being given in this?
yeah. What
That's
am
what.
I, it's like another phrasing of like, what am I learning here?
Yeah.
How is this for me?
How is this a gift like provision is such a crazy word for that experience.
Yeah, this is my provision. And so they're talking, like, they're just doing all these sacrifices. And I'm like looking at Aubrey, who has everything that he wants.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I don't,
That's
I don't know about this.
I think what I can imagine they're using to justify that is what has been used for so long in Latin America, which is resources. If you have the resources, it was almost expected socially that you would have a mistress and support a second family because you could. And it's like, we've been living this out. We've been living this out for so many centuries as a species. This is not new. This is God, we moved to Costa Rica for a year. I'm a relationship coach, so I obviously talked to everyone about their relationships and then dug into the statistics. It's 97% infidelity rate. Like it's madness and it's just it doesn't work. Resources or no resources, it's chaos. It's utter chaos. One man having like 8 children doesn't lead to that man being happy. I asked, and they were just like with multiple wives, like who maybe at the beginning feel like there might be enough. But then when it's too late and when they've gone down that path, they're like, this is fucked. This is misery.
Mhm.
I don't get the man I want to be with. I don't get the time with the person who helped me create life. And when kids are involved, everything changes. There is no time. How are you going to do that with 2 fucking women? Unless you guys are sleeping, excuse my language, but literally just had a kid.
Yeah.
What, like, at the same time and be a present father and husband unless you're all sleeping in the same bed with the newborns. And even then, barely any time. It's like there is a level of madness to it. And the thing you brought up about sacrifice was really good. At one point, I have it quoted here somewhere. Marc Gafni says, um, in sacrifice, we can never abandon ourselves. The fuck are you talking about, sir?
Yeah,
Like,
that's another one of his sentences
what
where
is
it's just like, it sounds, you're just like, if you're open and receptive, you're just like, okay. And if
that?
you're at all discerning, you're like,
Like,
what?
what? That is, and then they're like, yeah, we wouldn't want to have to compromise. And they attack the word compromise in the face of like this holy spiritual sacrifice. And it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, what? Compromise is like, I would see that as a spiritual practice where you're finding this co-creation of a new thing that both people are a yes to, that uses your creative intellect and all of human philosophy to be able to establish the creation of new life together.
Yeah.
Versus not one of you has to die at altering times to keep this eros alive, or you'll die miserable and hate each other or
Yeah.
cheat on each other. It's like, wait, what? I think there's a middle path.
No, I think the stuff with the sacrificing, it was interesting to me because it again kind of goes back to that same concept of that you get taught to do in a lot of these spiritual spaces of like, how is everything for me? Like, you're always reframing, how
Yeah,
is it for me? How is this actually for me? And so when you frame sacrifice in this way, like, and you can say things like, all relationships require sacrifice. Yes, they do. But what is that meaning to different people? Because then they're saying, like, they're sacrificing, Alana's sacrificing having a man sleep in her bed at night, her partner, the father of her future children, because it's for God. It's for the greater good. I'm like sacrificing this thing I want for God. And it's kind of like these concepts that I think at their core are beautiful. There is sacrifice. There's
yeah,
sacrifice in marriage.
yeah.
There's sacrifice. Like, I sacrifice pieces of but they're not even myself. They're like my ego self, Like, do I want to, I wish I had time to do this thing I want to do for myself today, but like I have to cook dinner for us.
Yeah.
Like these things, like there are these little sacrifices you make, but you're making them for the whole of this. thing that is giving you what you want.
Yeah. And that it's all like exactly like it's forming the thing you want. So it's not really a sacrifice. To me that feels like a compromise and that
Yeah.
feels beautiful where you're not like I never get to do this ever again because I'm in charge of dinner for this marriage. Like no, it's like I'll probably get to do that again. Tonight I have to cook dinner for my family because it's my commitment and like there's
Yeah.
something beautiful in that. Like with my child, like a lot of people keep telling me like, oh, you're just sacrificing so much. And same with my marriage. And I'm just like, well, I don't, it doesn't feel like that. Even if I don't get to go to the gym and cold plunge and sauna and spend hours in a bathtub, I'm like, I'll do it again one day. Like it's not
Yeah.
this like all or nothing. It doesn't require me to ask myself, am I abandoning myself
Yeah.
in this choice? I feel like that should come few and far between in a marriage, especially one that's been together for quite a long time. What questions really have us have to consider that outside of breaking commitments to each other?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, now that you say that, I'm like, I don't even know if I really like that word anyway. It's the sacrifice word because it does feel more like compromise.
And he says that it's in the Bible. He's not wrong, you know. I think it's the Abraham one where God's like telling Abraham he has to sacrifice his son, but then he stops him. He
Yeah.
doesn't actually have to. He just
Yeah.
has to consider the experience, you
Yeah.
know, and to like prove the true faith. Like they bring up the Bible and he's like it says in scripture, and it's vague enough that it uses the Bible to
It
like
says it in the
uses God
Bible.
again. Yeah, to say this is all for God but there is no like acute correlation to what they're talking about.
Another one of Gaffney's sentences I wrote down like that is there's nothing more whole than a broken heart.
Oh yeah, I have that one too. I'm like, what? What do you
Couple times,
mean?
like he's just like, and there's nothing more whole than a broken heart. It's so beautiful. It's your holy and broken hallelujah. I'm like, stop.
Like, explain it. Explain it. You know? Yeah. His poet and Aubrey's poet, hand in hand together, for sure. And I don't know if you've ever like dated a narcissist, but in
No,
that experience, you're constantly questioning yourself in this way. Not all narcissists. The one I dated was one of the ones where I would say was innocent, where like we went to therapy and did the work. And at the end of the day, sometimes they become more dangerous because with the words, with the toolbox of spirituality or of self development or of therapy and counseling, you can get really lost
totally.
of like, I mean, I guess I got to hold myself accountable in the same exact way. So if they're saying that they see this thing, even though their intention is different than mine, their intention is self-serving innately, wired wise, not maliciously. Like I will go insane because mine isn't.
Hmm.
So I will constantly be considering this other person's request that I consider I might be wrong, even though we're not on the same page of what we're trying to reach.
Yeah. Well, that's what happens, I think, in all relationships with narcissists is like, because I have not dated a narcissist, but I've had a parent who's a narcissist, not a malicious one, but an intense one. And, the cult leader is, I think, a very malicious narcissist. And
Yeah.
there's this like, and then I've had other people, like friends and stuff, where you're constantly as like a regular person in this relationship, especially, but you're always considering the other person. Like you're considering like how are they feeling? What might they need?
Mhm.
And you assume we're all doing that in the same way, like you were saying. And the narcissist doesn't do that. Like you don't exist to them in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. It's important to know that
Yeah.
when you're questioning your reality
Hmm.
because it requires a different type of consent and discernment.
Yeah. So like, because if Jordan and I have a conflict or something, right? Like I can trust that we're both doing that self-questioning. Like we're both being like, where can I take responsibility here? Where can I look at my own stuff here? But with these certain types of people, they're not doing that at all.
Yeah.
Even if
Or if
they
they
say
are, it's
that they
with an
are.
outcome.
What?
Or if they are, it's with an outcome. Like I know in
Yeah,
the past, whether it's been working with them as clients or dating them or being taught, like they might be like, okay, I can take responsibility for this because I know what it gets me
yeah,
is you staying longer, or I know what it gets me is for this fight to go away and I promise I'll do better and then do it again the next 2 hours. It's like
totally.
it's not backed by action or even the desire to do it at all. It's a tool.
Yeah,
Yeah. And it's got to be scary when you have that much resource to back it up. I kind of
totally.
imagine like a king, like with that much resource, being able to like flood the women he is engaging with things they've never had before to the extent they've never had it before.
And trips and
Yeah.
excitement, all these things, boats,
Yeah.
other
You've always
countries.
said enough of me. There's enough of me. And that'd be very confusing at 26, 28.
Yeah. Uh, I feel like we've kind of covered everything I wrote down. Oh, another thing I wrote down is two things. So one is we touched on the like they mention a bunch of times how they've had to die so many times
Yeah.
like in this relationship. And that also is something that stuck out as a red flag for me because I in my own time in these kind of worlds, I find that kind of death is so it can get so manipulated and romanticized. Like it's good for our ego to go through some ego deaths and stuff once in a while, but when it gets so romanticized to this point of like, oh, I'm just like dying over and over,
Yeah.
it's you're losing yourself. That's what's happening.
Yeah. It's this, I think that's kind of the druggy part too. That feels like it. Like Alana's like, I'm just constantly being pushed in my edges and I think I get somewhere and then it's another thing. And it's just like, it's exhausting. And the weird thing, I think this is the seductive part, is they're like, Marc Gafni at the end of it is like, these conversations are for all the babies that wouldn't be born if we weren't brave enough to like introduce this new paradigm. And it's like, what? Like, what do you mean? He's like, there are all these people sleeping alone who shouldn't be sleeping alone and will continue to sleep alone if we don't do this. And that's why we're doing this. It's for you and your self-expression. And it's just like, that's delusional. I think that's the part of the podcast that makes me so angry is like, do this, have this, believe this, but to come out and be like, this is for you, people. We're doing this for society, we're doing this for you, and we're doing this for everyone while shitting on everything is it's manipulating socially. And I think that's the part of people that were like, no, no, no.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That was an absurd thing to say as well.
yeah.
We're doing this for you all the babies that wouldn't be born if we're like
Like what?
I don't even think this guy has kids,
I
Gaffney.
don't. I mean, I hope not. With his history, that would be very confusing as a child, but I don't know. I know he's married.
Yeah, he kept referencing his wife, but I'm sure they're poly because that was his whole thing is polyamory. Gaffney had a big that seems to be his
No idea. Yeah.
eros-ness. Um, and another question I kept asking that I think is, extra relevant for you is like with these women, I think sometimes when women are in certain dynamics, it can be helpful to look at it from an outside perspective and just be like, would I want this for my daughter?
Yeah. Definitely not. I mean, in the poly world, and we're talking ideally, but when I was in it, that's what I was looking for is people who were happy. The people I was interviewing, not just poly, but monogamish, open, whatever you want to call it, had to have been married for 8 years and consider themselves happy for me to interview them. 8 years or over, just minimum 8 years. Um, and and all of them were pretty conscious about it. And even single people who I interviewed who had been in this lifestyle for ages, people who had made mistakes, people who were in very long-term partnerships, all of them were like, don't bring a saltwater fish into a freshwater tank. Like they'll drown, and vice versa. So if they were together and they were bringing someone else, like if they were doing it consciously or sustainably, it had to be someone open. You can't bring a monogamous person in and expect them to survive
Hmm.
because it's not kind unless they are open. Like there's
Hmm.
something innately effed up about continuing to pursue someone saying, "No, I'm this," in multiple relationships and imposing this part of yourself on them by having them commit to you deeply first
Hmm.
and to the lifestyle you give them and everything else you give them. Like there's something effed up there. Like there's so many people that are open and poly on this planet. So many. They're easy to find. They are very easy to find. So
Yeah, like he could be having relationships with
yeah,
these people if that was what he wanted.
yeah. And so for my daughter, again, if she ever came to me and she was like, I really want to explore being open or monogamish, I would want to support her. I would obviously, tell her what I've learned about it and support her through it as long as it sounded like it was organically coming from inside of her and she was very self-aware through it all and was open to being supported. Um, inside I'd be like, oh, darn, you know?
And I am of the opinion that I just think that almost all the time it's just a wounding or like it's not coming from a whole healed
I think
integrated
it's
place.
either trauma or like deeply, it's that kind of longing for community again.
Yeah.
The open community is really tight-knit community. There's a lot of honesty and communication, so it just gives you more access to things that like maybe traditional friendships and relationships don't. And so there's so many things playing out, like
Yeah.
cultural deficiencies, lack of social modeling of healthy monogamy, like where I could see her coming from an innocent place and being like, I want to explore it. I don't think it's where she would end as long as we do a good job of modeling to her what one-on-one love looks like. I'm still very adamant that if you can't have a like responsible, loving, honest relationship with one person, how are you going to have it with 10?
Yeah.
Um, and so I tend to agree with you. I don't think even if we don't fuck her up and we do the best we possibly can as two madly in love people, that safeguards her fully from ever having the curiosity. And so if she came, I would want to tell her all of this and like give her the tools to be able to make that discernment of other people who are just curious and of people who are like committed to collecting a certain kind of commitment from others they're not willing to give,
Yeah.
which is what this feels like to some extent.
Yeah. Well, and it's very telling that the ex's videos. I was
Oh my
watching one of
God.
them yesterday,
Yeah.
the day before. I was just like, whoa, because she is speaking to everything these women are feeling from like a healed, like she's gone through it and healed, and she seems really happy. I was so happy for her watching them. I was like, she seems like she's thriving, and like all of that pain, she's kind of getting her validation
Yeah.
now, like watching this all come out.
Yeah, because that was quite a difficult thing to watch socially because she'd been exactly how Vailana is, a tool for sharing the how open and poly is the way. And they did so many podcasts and talked about how this is the way. And then Aubrey meets Vyana and marries her like within weeks,
Yeah.
and they had been engaged for 7 years, Whitney and Aubrey.
Oh,
7 years. And can you imagine like him coming to you and being like, we got married in Vegas under Elvis because I could not wait to marry
wait,
her
wait, wait. Were they still
monogamously.
together?
What?
Was
No, they had broken up,
okay.
and then within weeks he married
Okay.
Vyana. But he bought the ring like before, it was like I can't imagine feeling like, wow, how is that possible if it took that long to know I was a yes? And you meet this woman and within weeks commit monogamously to her and marry her quickly. Like what a mind fuck. And
Yeah.
then the second this came out, her videos came out where she was like, sometimes you just gotta trust God because it was hard to watch socially and in all her comments, it's people being like, there's kind of a peace in seeing this happen because
Yeah.
she was like, that could have been me. I could have been Vylana in that situation where I think what's playing out here is every woman's, and I think even women in poly, every woman's nightmare, which is like you're committed deeply to someone younger comes in, and that commitment gets broken, regardless of what that commitment is, in the name of that younger person. And you're like, you can do whatever you want, you know, they say, but this is happening.
Yeah.
There's like, it's just gnarly to watch. And sad. But like you said, it's nice to see her speak up also because she was someone that was very much doing what they're doing right now on display as an example of a monogamous woman being poly, living her best poly life, and then coming out afterwards being like, I was so fucking manipulated.
Yeah.
You don't always have to be growing to be happy. Like you could just be with someone who like loves you and be
Yeah.
at peace and like grow together. And yeah,
It's a good question to ask yourself, like when people are in these kinds of situations, because you never, you rare, like you don't, the whole point of being manipulated is you don't know that it's happening.
yeah,
So, like, when people are so adamant that they're not being manipulated, it's
yeah,
like a good question to ask is like, well, how would I know? Like, how would
yeah,
you know if you were?
yeah,
If you're so sure you're not.
yeah. It's really tricky because, especially if you're somebody intellectual,
Yeah.
words make it very easy to identify with what you're exploring,
Mm-hmm.
especially in your 20s when everyone's like, "Oh, you're just exploring."
Mm-hmm.
Very much so. Yeah, I don't I don't know if there are any like set in stone ways other than is your health deteriorating?
Well, yeah, I mean, like, it should be kind of an unanswerable question. It's like, because the answer is like, you wouldn't necessarily know.
Yeah,
And I think that's why, like, I think we're all being manipulated to some extent all the time by the world around us. And so it's just good to kind of be aware and be like, I could be being manipulated. Like, how am I sure? Am I allowed to say no? Am I allowed to question here? What happens when I question? All of these things, because if you're not allowed to do certain things or feel certain ways, or you get punished, like when you're being manipulated, you're so convinced that you're not being manipulated, and you have total autonomy.
yeah,
Like the way that Gaffney keeps saying, like, um, a teacher will never tell you what to do. If a teacher tells you what to do, run.
yeah,
Okay. The manipulator will never, well, they might out, a subtle narcissistic kind of manipulator is rarely going to outright say, you can't do that.
yeah,
It'll be way more subtle where, like, you feel like you can't do that because you don't want to. But if you were to look deeper, it's like, well, it's actually because I'm going to lose love if I do. Or they're going to be disappointed in me if I do.
yeah.
And
There's
so
a
it's still all about them.
innate fear. And he does say that about, I thought I maybe wrote it down, about teachers, but then there's this other part where he says, I don't think I wrote it down, but he says like a psychiatrist can't tell you, uh, a doctor can't tell you, a guide might, and then just flies right over it, and it's like,
Yeah.
whoa, wait a second. Like, it's when he's saying like, people are going to want to pathologize this, but they should mythologize it instead. And it's like, It's just a very beautiful way to, myth is riddled in gore and betrayal, and it's okay because it's just a story. And this is mythology.
It's just a holy and broken hallelujah.
Exactly. It's just a song. It's fine. It's like it's not. It's real. And it has real pathological effects on people, long-lasting pathological effects on people. And I get to work with a lot of the back end of it. I've lived the back end, I've seen the back end, and it is really sad. It's really hard and it's really fucking broken. And it's definitely something you should be cautious and afraid of because of the cost. The cost is so high.
It takes a long time to
Yeah,
recover from that.
yeah, yeah. And so the introduction of that myth, I think it's another one of those softenings of like, what's the worst that can happen? It's just this beautiful tale of love.
Hmm.
And you guys are just mystics in this lineage. It's like all these
Yeah.
beautiful identities.
The
It's
Cosmo. What is it? Yeah.
erotic humanism.
What's the mystic? I wrote it down somewhere. Because, yeah, it's cosmo-erotic humanism, but then he also calls them something else. It's like something mystics. We're like erotic
Um,
mystics,
yeah,
maybe?
erotic mystics.
Yeah, yeah, erotic mystic. You get this identity of like, I'm an erotic mystic.
Yeah, sacrificing myself in the name of all human expression and God. It's like, yeah, that would be quite a drug you're on, even just philosophically. Imagine living in that environment
All the
where
time.
every day you are that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Imagine falling out of that environment.
Well, and then it brings me pain because it's like, uh, you've wasted all your childbearing. Like, what if you've wasted all your childbearing
Yeah.
years in this dynamic? I saw that happen to people who just even were in the cult I was in, where like, uh, they spent, all their 30s, say, in like one taste in all these
Yeah.
communities where having sex with many people was the kind of highest value. Like, it wasn't children, it wasn't settling down and having a family. It was like, go have sex, like living by all of these principles, like the cult teachings, what the leader is saying, all this stuff. You're following it, following it, following it, and then they get out and they're like, oh my god, I'm 40, and like I wanted to get married and have kids,
Yeah.
and now I'm stuck unwinding all of this disaster
Yeah.
of the cult that I was in and all these beliefs, and now I'm like running out of time. Like, it's a horrible place to be.
It is.
It's really sad.
I would say, so I dated the guy who was open, was in One Taste, and he worked at One Taste and was like the head ladies. We'll try not use any names, but right hand man for a while, and he was super traumatized by it. And I feel like I wasted a lot of my childbearing years because of the philosophical approach to that relationship as well. Luckily, I've had my kid and I'll have more, but like there's so much time just questioning reality in the name of like truth and spirit.
Yeah.
When it's just like, if you want something, there's a high likelihood you just want it. Like,
Yeah.
that you could just want it and it's fine, and it's, I don't know, it's this like messy orchestra of like what we lack in society and like us craving community and craving examples of healthy relationships, not having them and being willing to try something else in hopes of this thing that I think innately people want. There was a time during that period where I was like, okay, this is so crazy to remember, but I was working with a lawyer to provide an alternative marriage contract, where you renew every 5 to 7 years, because my belief was that that would give people um, not incentive, but it would kind of, we don't have, you get married and then the next like major thing is death, or like you've got anniversaries to celebrate that last ritual, but there's not like another thing you're looking forward to. So I thought it could like resurrect marriage in a way where like you're
Whoa.
held accountable to these contracts that you have to remake this amount of time. and you can get out of it if you want. And it was really hard. I met with lawyers, I met with all these different people who were like, you can't. Like, there's no way. And there's something interesting about that, just like how ingrained this like one path is and how hard society will fight to remain in that one path being available worldwide. It's not every country, but it was surprising to me because of at the time I was like 70% failure rate, seemed like high enough that we should look into alternatives. But now I see like there's just a lot of philosophy that would make that logical when like a lifelong commitment, I don't know, it brings about a much more serious alchemy that maybe trains people who take it seriously around things like having children, where it's
Yeah.
like such a massive commitment. Nothing else in your life has prepared you for that level of commitment.
Mm.
Marriage kind of warms that up if you're doing it in a traditional routine, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, I was just thinking about it. I think like uh because I think I've heard the argument made that polyamory, I think it was in Louise Perry's book maybe, uh that polygamy might be also, biologically normal, but monogamy is a lot better for society, like for high functioning societies that work and last. And I also think that like people used to get married. Divorce was a lot harder, right? And I also remember reading that when, like, at the time when they made divorce a lot easier, I believe this was only like in the 40s or something, like, it wasn't that long ago. They decided to make divorce easier because it was necessary, for some women if they were stuck in abusive marriages or something like
Mm.
that. It's like there has to be an easier way out, but they never foresaw, like they thought they'd make it easier and that would be the rare exception, but they didn't foresee that it would just make divorce rates skyrocket. And I think that there's something in, I think, like the beauty and sacred commitment of marriage, where I don't think you're never gonna have a perfect society where nobody ever cheats and everybody is just monogamous and faithful and perfect. Because sometimes people cheat from their own insecurities, not even because of the marriage itself. Um, but I think there's something to be said for, like, as a whole, having a society that, like, when you get married, you stay married. And if you stray, you've done something really wrong and you're kind of shamed by the society and people look down on you. Like, this is a bad thing to do. And you are constantly working toward being more and more faithful. I'm not saying that that's
Yeah.
pleasant for the people involved, but I just think societally as a whole, that functions better than this, like, we can get divorced whenever we want and we just, like, who cares? And
It's it's tricky. It's tricky because I am like divorce is non-optional for us unless there's infidelity, not because we couldn't get through it, but because I don't want to do the any more work on that in my life.
yeah.
And I had to have a really sobering conversation because that's a really hard boundary to put where it's like I know I could get through it. And who knows, maybe having kids, I would think twice about this, but I just have spent so much of my life in that question that like I
Yeah.
needed him to understand that like it's work I'm not willing to do. And my family lineage, no one divorced, but they weren't necessarily happy. And
Mm.
so growing up, it's what led me to open is I was convinced that had they left, maybe they would be. And and so now I've landed somewhere in the middle because removing that option for me had me get really serious about what this commitment means And I had to do that to really take this seriously, because before that I was like, well, just divorce. Like, there's just so much that I think this ritual could benefit from, really, like, us as a society teaching ourselves and each other, like, the meaning of it, what we want it to look like, and all this good stuff, so that it's not done so casually. Because a lot of
Hmm.
people, I think, are actually compatible, but are divorcing because they're like, we tried therapy, it didn't work.
Totally.
But it's like finding a good therapist or coach or guide, or it's like really fucking hard. And there's not a lot of, we didn't get educated in that. I'm hoping the younger generations are, even if it's through social media and stuff. But what I find interesting about divorce and marriage, there's this divorce lawyer who published his findings, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but he's like, you would think I'd be the first person to be like, marriage doesn't work, we should stop trying. But he's like, it's one of the only technologies where it fails more than 50%. And the people who failed at it will continue trying to use it
Yeah.
multiple times in their lives, which means there's something so valuable in it that it can strip them of money, dignity, their children, and they will still be like, I'm doing that again, you know? And there's value in, like, really acknowledging that as a society.
Hmm. That's a really beautiful thing. Yeah, I don't know what I would do. I think about that sometimes because I've been kind of trying to figure out what my stance sort of is on that, like how I feel about divorce really
Mm,
in general.
yeah.
Because and sometimes I feel like, because like you, like I feel committed to Jordan no matter what. Like I just feel like it's not an option. We're committed for life. And then I think like, uh, okay, play it out. Like, what if we had kids and then he did cheat on me? I don't think this would ever happen. But like, you know, what and sometimes some days I think like I'm so committed to him and who he is and so committed to our marriage and to our family that I think that like that would just be my um cards in life and I would just play them out. Like I would just, I would figure it out, we'd figure it out, I'd learn to be happy, like I would somehow do it
Yeah.
because I don't think that breaking up the family, unless it's like there's real abuse or just something, like I just don't know that it's ever really beneficial. And then I start like, is my growth and happiness and like liberation, self actualization more important than
Mm,
the wholeness of my family? I don't know that I think I would have said yes years ago for sure, but now I don't know that I feel that way.
yeah.
But I don't know. It's hard to say. If I was in that situation, like,
Yeah.
would I really? I don't know.
It depends on the people. Like, I will
Yeah.
tell you that the kids who come from a family with infidelity where the parents stay together and don't do work on themselves, it's misery for the kid, because
Mm-hmm.
the energetics that are lived out are fractured. It's no longer a unit, even if they're forcing the unit for the kid. And you see this time and time again where the child's like, that was horrible. Why did you guys stay together? Like, it wasn't for me. There was something else there. It hurt me. But I think if a couple is willing, and this is why I'm like, I'm not, it's important that you commit to me knowing I'm not willing. If both people are willing to heal from it, and I've worked with couples like this, and I just so deeply admire it. And it's why I would question myself here if it did happen, around whether it's still true or not, that I wouldn't do it. If both people like work on the marriage, if both people are willing to work on the marriage, that infidelity can bring them so much closer. Not
Yeah.
because it becomes the norm, like what we're seeing in this podcast, but because there was something in one or both of them. Like, it might not be about the relationship at all, and some
Yeah.
long lost trauma or a self-worth issue. Something about that healing, overcoming, and coming together has that bond fused together and be something really beautiful. And for
Mm-hmm.
the couples who are like, yeah, we would heal if that happened, like, God, I have such envy and respect for them, because I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
that's incredible. I can't even imagine being
Mm-hmm.
so dead set confident. And again, it's not that I couldn't get there. I just don't
Well,
want
it's been
to.
such a major pain point of your life, right?
Yeah.
So that makes it.
And I was a kid. So, like, I would never want to do that to my kid. Saying that though, I know what's possible and I know that people can heal from it, but it's messy. You know, it could take
Mhm.
so long and the kid will see that too. Someone described it like putting hot sauce in oatmeal and mixing it in and then trying to separate it. It's like, it's probably possible, but it's really hard.
Yeah.
Kind of gets into everything. And it can be really powerful, like you said. When someone's like, this is just what's in my cards, I
Yeah.
think that's the path to healing. That is the answer. It's like that willingness from both to be like, all right, how do we get back to each other?
Hmm. Yeah. I think about that a lot. I think there's just like a as we get older. That's the other thing that stands out to me about all this stuff on this podcast is like Aubrey's 44.
Yeah,
Like, and it's sad to me when I see people, and I know people like in their 30s and 40s who are still taking all these drugs, going to festivals, like they don't have kids. They're just like doing all of that. And I'm just like, how, at what point do you kind of mature? Like to be 44 and still and doing this?
yeah,
Like, is that your legacy? I just don't. But yeah, I think about and I think it keeps bringing me back to this same thing I've been talking about all year of just like what are we living for? Like what do you cuz I think a lot of the new age stuff encourages us to live for ourselves and our own self-actualization, our self-growth, our self everything. Like
yeah,
living for yourself matters the most.
yeah,
Your freedom, your experiences, you. It's like you. And it's like, I think there's something more beautiful in that consideration of like, whether it's your like love, your family, God, there's something bigger than just me. Like, it's not about me and my, what I think that I want all the time. Like, and that's why I think I come to that place of like, maybe this is just what life has handed me, you know? And can I,
yeah,
like, what if there's an acceptance of that?
yeah. I mean, to some degree, I feel like that is the most evolved level
Yeah.
of commitment where like nothing could break us. We want
Hmm.
to talk about like monogamy in its like most evolutionary state. It would be the indestructible commitment.
Yeah.
You know, it's like actually committing for life to the thing you said you'd commit for life to.
Hmm.
Mm, I think what we're taught outside of a relationship is not conducive to a long-term relationship because it has you feel like you're sacrificing constantly, you know.
Yeah.
But there's levels. I think kids bring so much of this to the forefront as so important because before kids, I was dead set I'd never even consider working on it. Where now I'm like, maybe, like if we're both
Hmm.
a yes to working on it, like why would I rob her of that? You know,
Yeah.
as well. Like there is consideration outside of yourself. You're not the main important one. Your happiness is not the only goal, and the result is still your happiness. If that
Hmm.
makes sense. Like just because you give up your happiness as a goal doesn't mean you're not reaching these like untouched levels of happiness you never even knew to want because it was just you before.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's tricky.
Yeah. When I look at like the contracts I was trying to make, it's just like this desperate attempt to like touch the thing without having to like fully commit to the thing, you know, just get a little like dose, play it out and pretend it was real, have it be a little bit more real with some legal consequences. This is a much deeper combo, but our child is a sovereign child because a lot of legal contracts in America basically make you,
Wait, what does that mean?
this is quite a conversation. A lot of legal contracts in America, including marital and like birth certificates, social securities, basically make you an employee of the corporation that is the United States.
Yes.
Um,
Does your daughter not have a social security number?
she is a national. She doesn't have a social. And so she still gets a passport and everything, but
Yeah.
she's her
I
own
follow
being.
this girl online who is that.
Yeah, it's cool. She can get a social if she wants later. She can travel the whole world. She has all the rights. But she just gets an autonomous life, and that's the part where like I hesitate to talk too much about it because it's so complex. I don't have the full language around it to talk about it responsibly, but um, marriage licenses have a kind of darker element to it around what you're committing to the state. And it still felt important to us, even as a family that went through the semi-grueling process of having her be an autonomous being. Um, it still felt important to get the marriage license for me and for us. Like something was on the line, something bigger than just a promise, a verbal promise. You know,
Totally.
there's something important about contracts, and unfortunately, we have so few in society that really
Yeah.
hold us to a standard as a community and hold us to our own stated standards.
Yeah. Yeah. I was surprised that there was something significant that happened for us when we got married. And I didn't think getting married was going to change anything at all because
Yeah.
we owned a house and we were living together and everything. But it totally did. Like, it just felt like we've both officially signed and made this commitment for life.
Yeah, it did for us as well. And it
Yeah.
was relaxing. Like,
Yeah.
you know, it was all the fears from before were important because they got us to a full yes. And then when we got to that yes, it was like, oh, it's like a home. Like the commitment is a home. And I think that is because it's more than just a word.
Hmm.
Like there's an importance to the social accountability, I think, that keeps us to our word versus just like, I make you a promise forever, but only we know if I break it, really.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that I've heard of couples that, like, I know some couples who I've been told by other adults that, like, one has cheated on the other, but they've just stayed together
Yeah.
and nobody seems to really know about it. You know, maybe some other adults know about it, but um I don't know. There's something admirable in that for me. Like, to me, when I look at it and I'm like, they're still together. Like, and they spend holidays with their children and it's all like an
When they
intact family.
divorce?
What?
When they divorce?
No, like they didn't divorce.
Yeah, yeah.
So I see it in a lot of different formats. Like, but I'm saying, like, I know couples that have cheated on each other, but
Yeah.
nobody seems, it's a big secret. Like, no one, the kids don't know.
Yeah.
No one really knows, and
Yeah.
they've just stayed together. And they will spend all holidays together. Like, everyone's like a big family, and maybe they're not super happy deep down, but that's remained intact.
Yeah.
And uh I've also, like, the trainer that we work with, he and his wife split up. Um, they had kids and they split up, and now they both have like new partners, but they all are on great terms, and they all still like spend holidays together. Like, they do stuff all together, which is definitely better, I think, than everything being split apart.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. And then in my house, like, my mom cheated on my dad, but I never knew that as a child.
Mm.
And it happened when I was really young, and I didn't find out until they divorced when I was in my early 20s.
Mm.
And I've wondered, like, for a while I was like, well, they should have gotten divorced when I was little. But actually, I never knew that there was anything wrong in the relationship.
Mm.
Deep down, I'm sure I felt different things at different times, but like, as a whole, what was modeled to me was just like a marriage, like a
Wow.
marriage that stayed together.
There's probably some deep value in that, actually.
Yeah, and sometimes I wonder, like, I don't blame my dad at all for uh leaving in the way he did when he did, but like, And when they divorced, I was happy initially because I was like, they should both be happy. Like, I
Yeah.
want them to both be happy. Eventually, I felt happy. But now sometimes I wonder, like, yeah, I feel differently, I think. Like, I think I resent a lot the fact that, like, the family was broken, even though it happened in my 20s. Like, we can't all be together. We can't all, something ruptured. And,
Yeah.
like you said, I think both people have to be willing to work on it. And when they're not, I don't know what you do. But I don't know. I think it's a complicated question. I don't know exactly where I stand, but I just feel like there's something very beautiful when people do just kind of accept what they're handed and stay in.
Yeah. And I think in some level, it's a reflection of two things also. It's just like, that's like the highest level of difficulty in healing in a relationship. And people are struggling to just be happily married when they love each other and are faithful to each other. And so I
Yeah.
think for most people, it's like there's no path back,
Hmm.
And again, it's like a lack of modeling. There's lots of shame in society, so they're isolating. Therapy can feel very clinical, and one or both people just not be open to it, or it feel really unfair, unjust. Like, and we also don't have modeling around what that process can look like and how long it can take. So I think there's just like this lack of knowledge that on the other side, there can be something epic and something more beautiful than what was there in the first place. And it's the same with monogamy and with marriage and stuff. We've just heard these like horrible stories over and over again and seen it in media over and over again. They're just like ingrained in our bodies. It's like that's the only outcome. But there's something totally beautiful about a family being able to come back from that and what we teach like a future generation about what's possible when
What
both,
matters, right? Like, yeah,
yeah.
I think there is a modeling. You're right. There's not a lot of stories about that and not a lot of modeling. And there is something that's like just so beautiful. I don't know if I don't even know these people, so I don't know if this is like legitimate or not, but I watched there's a three-part series on what's it called, that dating app that was for married people? Ab
Oh yeah.
Ashley
Ashley Madison.
Ashley Madison. I watched that recently and I was so into it. I was like, well, it was so dramatic. And but they follow one of the couples that they follow is this Christian couple where the girl just seems so sweet. Like they somehow they end up like they do it sing a song together and they go viral, and so they have a very public relationship. Like their marriage is very public and they're so cute together and they're such a model. But he secretly um makes this account on Ashley Madison and he never actually meets up with anyone from it, but it turns out that's just part of his very deviant behavior where he's like going to massage parlors and like doing all these things behind the scenes, and that all comes out and she finds out about all of it, and they take some time apart, but he explains how like it was never about their marriage at all. It was just like dark stuff in him, and they do end up staying together and like coming back together, and they sit like the interviewer talks to them separately through the whole film, and then at the end he has them like sit down together on the couch and they're like still a unit and they've worked through it. And I don't know how genuine they are or not, but it appears like they have really worked through and become a lot closer. And I was like, wow, there's something really beautiful
Yeah.
in that.
I could see like if the man was willing to be like, well, this is where this is coming from. The man, whoever cheated, is willing to be like, where is this coming from in me? And like work on the deeper thing. Let's say it's sex addiction or like porn addiction or any other of million reasons it could be. Staying would make sense because then what's left is like actually healing something that would continue to rupture the relationship in one way or another for the rest of their lives. So it coming forward in a rupture is in service to the bigger commitment. Like it wasn't a mistake that this happened.
Right.
Both people want the union. It came up, they want to fix it. But if someone was like, I just promise that I'll never do it again and I don't have any issues, which I've seen so many times as well, that's when I would be like, I can understand divorce because
Yeah.
there's no chance that it won't happen again. In some way, it doesn't have to be cheating. It could be
I
other.
do think they might have used to allow divorce for adultery,
That makes sense.
or at least adultery of the woman, maybe. I don't know, because there's something like adultery is like the biggest sin in the Bible. Not the biggest, but it's like what it's mentioned over and over and
Yeah,
over and over again, you know? Um,
I didn't know that. Mm.
that you didn't know that it's
Uh,
mentioned?
that so many times that it's like
Yeah, like if you read Proverbs, like
Proverbs.
read and start at the beginning of Proverbs, because this was actually my intro to the Bible, was
Really?
like, I was like, what should I read? And I was like, I'll read the Psalms and I'll read Proverbs and I'll just like read one a day and see what happens. And that was before I really felt Christian. I was just curious. And yeah, Proverbs, I don't know which one it is, but in the beginning, say in the first like 10, there's many over and over and over and over and over again where it's like essentially like don't cheat on your wife, don't go lay with prostitutes. Like it talks over and over about adultery and like how it's wrong and bad and should never happen and
Mm.
is the devil and all these things.
Because I only read the Bible when I was very young. And so I think it'd be really, I just bought one. So I think it'll be really
Oh,
interesting to like go through and like, yeah.
it's yeah, I've started reading it most days. I read some, and I tried to join this thing. Do you know who Charlie Kirk is? He's
Some
like a
relation
political
point.
commentator. His wife, Erica Kirk, has this thing called, I'm sure there's many groups like this, but her thing is called Proclaim 365.
Mm.
And she has like a group that gets together, and every January they start their thing and they read the whole Bible in a year.
Wow. That's
And
cool.
so, and they even send it to you like on your phone. And it's a really cool thing because every day you get the scripture and then you get, like they work with some sort of pastor or priest who like, I think it's a pastor. I want to say maybe anyway, it doesn't matter. He, explains it like, and you can click on certain verses and like it'll open up a new page to explain it to you. It's really
Mhm.
cool.
Um,
And I started following their like order of reading things. Like I started reading it in that order, but it was hard to do because they're in the middle of the year and I wanted to start at the beginning, but it doesn't really work that way. So
mm.
I'm kind of sporadically doing it, and then I'm hoping in January I want to like start with the group and like do it every day and get through the whole thing in a year, you know?
Awesome.
Because otherwise it's so overwhelming. It's like,
It
where do
is.
you start and where do you like, it's a lot.
Yeah, we have the Bible sitting there. We're in the same thing. We're like,
But
what?
I've been amazed that like every time I sit down and I read it, I'm like, wow. And I know it's so it's so like silly, but it's just like this is really wise. Like I should be reading this every day because every time I read it, I'm like, oh, the answers to all my life questions are just in these pages. It's
It's
funny.
awesome. It's beautiful.
Anyway, is there anything you wanted to touch on that we didn't touch on from the whole thing, or did I feel like we covered?
We did it. We did the thing.
We did it.
Yeah.
Well, I wish them well. I hope
Yeah, I do.
hope
I
it
do.
works out. I hope they take some of the feedback of their community
Yeah.
and don't have children all together. But who knows?
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. They're already posting quite publicly, so I'm sure we'll be in the loop of their life, which
Yeah.
yeah, it's their offering to us, I guess. I
Well,
love being on these.
huh?
I love speaking to you. Thank you for going
Yeah,
in
me
there and
too.
dissecting it with me.
Well, when you were the one who reached out to me and you were like, I want to talk about it, I was like, well, I like having conversations with you. So any conversation we have will go into interesting places. So I was like, I guess I'll look at it. And then as soon as I started looking at it, I was like, oh yeah, there's so much. So
So,
I'm
so
sure it will be helpful for people. Thank you for the suggestion and for sharing your time with us, especially as a new mother.
anytime. It's so fun. It's so fun, Dima. Thanks for having these.